Hello and welcome to the vlog. This is part 2 of the great adventure cruising across the Mersey estuary and up the Manchester Ship Canal. I've left a link to part 1 in the video description. We'd spent the night moored at Ellesmere Port near the western end of the canal and were now heading east. It was going to be a long day and it was another early start. And we're off again. Up the Manchester Ship Canal, about 36 miles I think to probably Salford Keys. I'm aboard narrowboat Perseverance, owned by Michael and his wife Jo. They're better known as Minimal List here on YouTube. It was another lovely clear start to the day, and the canal waters were, unsurprisingly, nice and calm. The presence of sheep on the bank made the rather large ship canal feel a little more like a normal narrowboat canal. And swans too, albeit with rather fewer boaters to harass for food than they'd find on our usual canals. Otherwise, it's all rather industrial round here, with oil refineries and chemical plants and that kind of thing. Up in the well deck were me, Jo, Lorna, aka London Boat Girl, seen here filming for her video of the trip, the video description has a link to that, and of course George the dog, who's going to have to keep his legs crossed for the duration as there's nowhere really to stop on this canal until we get to the end. The previous day we'd shared a lock with a giant tanker. Today, not so much traffic around, but what there was certainly bigger than your average narrowboat, and cracking on at a fair pace too. As we prepared to go around the town of Runcorn, the River Weaver came in from the right. That's the same River Weaver that you can access from the Anderton boat lift on the Trent and Mersey Canal. This is where it ends. Beyond that wall, which holds the canal in place, is the Mersey, which is now a river by this point. I don't know why the wall is so complicated here. It looks like some kind of sluice operation that could let water into or out of the canal, but I am absolutely making it up as usual. It's all a bit Mad Max or Waterworld though, don't you think? On the northwesternmost point of Runcorn are new houses. The canal's not that scenic to look over, but maybe you can also see the Mersey from up there. Ahead is the first of many bridges. It's the Silver Jubilee Bridge, with a 330-metre span on that arch. Built in 1961 and widened in 1977, hence its name, as 77 was the Queen's Jubilee year. You don't see enough castles on the end of bridges, do you? More housing there, called the decks. Unlike the dog, Michael could take toilet breaks whilst aboard, so Jo took the tiller for a while. There's not always a lot to see on this canal, but it does have an abundance of bridges, which begs the question, how do the big tankers get through? After all, look how low that is. The answer, it's a swing bridge. The whole thing is on a massive pivot on the left, so it can be rotated out when a ship needs to pass. We, however, can slip right under and no one's the wiser. Other bridges were just built high up to start with. That is sage advice. The last thing we want to do is dredge up a fuel pipeline. Another swing bridge at a place called Walton. and just behind those flats is what might be a winding hole on the ship canal, that is, a turning place for boats. It's absolutely massive, of course. Cormorants are the herons of this canal, rushing off when you try to film them. As we go past Stockton Heath, Latchford and Grappenhall, possibly Grapnel, I don't know, I'm not local, it's bridge-tastic, and it signals we're heading to our first lock of the day, Latchford Locks. A pair of locks, in fact, of which we're going into the biggest. They knew we were coming thanks to Michael's excellent and extensive admin in advance of the trip, so the levels were set our way and the gates open. Interestingly, they have extra gates halfway along, so that when shorter boats come in, they only need to raise or lower half the lock, which saves water. It is quite a journey just from one end of the lock to the other, frankly.
How high are we going?
Michael entered discussions with a chap up top about where to tie on, though in reality the lock was so gentle we needn't have bothered. It's a big rise though. Look at the watermark on the walls. We'd be going up several metres here. The water drifted aimlessly in. Looking at the surface, it felt like we were in some boiling cauldron, but the water was, for sure, very cold indeed. Many minutes later and the top gates opened. All hydraulic here, no pushing balance beams round with your buttocks. George the dog was most disappointed not to get off and walk up the towpath like he normally does, but there isn't one. After the lock, I took a turn steering for a while, looking very manly and attractive as usual in my life jacket and woolly hat. Form an orderly queue, ladies. No fighting now. We aimed at and went under the Thelwall fire duck. Then Lorna steered for a bit. And she took us expertly into lock number 3 at Earlham. Holding onto a ladder is hilarious apparently. What larks! There's nothing like the joy of a perch and a poo. Then, with it being around 2 p.m, the birds clocked off for a spot of lunch. And we were swiftly at the brilliantly named Dumplington, where Lock 4 of 5 awaited us, just around the corner from Trafford Park on the edge of Manchester. We were practically at our destination. At Barton there are 2 particularly impressive bridges. First, this one, which carries the Salford Western Gateway Road and lifts the entire bridge vertically using giant pulleys on the 4 columns. How amazing is that? Like the crazy, law-ignoring rebels we are, we ignored the stop sign and went underneath it. The next bridge is even cooler. The Barton Swing Aqueduct is exactly that, an aqueduct, carrying the Bridgewater Canal over the Manchester Ship Canal. And a giant pivot means when ships need to get through on the lower canal, the whole bridge, carrying the upper canal in a steel trough, swings open. It is the only swing aqueduct in the world and was opened in, get this, 1894. It's 100 metres long and weighs over 1,400 tonnes, including 800 tonnes of water, held in, when it's opened, by gates at either end. It's just mind-boggling. If your mind isn't boggled by this, you have no soul. After one final lock, the outskirts of Salford hove into view. This is where many media production companies, big and small, have set up their north of England bases, including my old employer ITV, as well as the BBC, plus loads of others. It's a hub of film and TV stuff here. There's the Beeb. A bit more ITV there. Happy memories. And hello to any of my former colleagues who might be watching. On the left, after this approaching footbridge, is where we'd find a mooring and stop. But before that, Michael just wanted to go a fraction further on, to locate Pomona Lock. It reconnects the ship canal with the Bridgewater Canal, and would be Joe and Michael's exit back onto the regular network. The lock is down that arm, and a virtual prize if you can spot the lock gates amongst the concrete, graffiti and grot. Then we turn back to finish our journey.
And this is it, the end of our massive journey. Media City in Salford. And now we're just looking for somewhere to moor and possibly have a nice cup of tea.
And right here, next to a water sports centre, we pulled up. I got off and headed back to my own boat. I hope you enjoyed this special trip. Check the links in the video description for the locations and the others videos. Cheerio!